welcome back everyone to another episode. So actually the first episode of Modern Primer, and I'm your boy iPhone phone case. So today we'll be talking about a deck I've been playing a lot lately. It's basically Blue-Red Murktide, one of the most meta decks at the moment. And this primer is more intended for people that are familiar with the deck, not if you're just completely brand new and picking it up for the first time, sleeving it up for the first time. More of people that have a couple reps, at least a couple reps I would say. I mean, I have a decent amount of modern leagues with the deck, but by no means I'm an expert, so if you want that kind of advice, I suggest you go check out Pro Tour. But this is just to maybe give some tricks or some things, just going over the deck, just priming people how to play it if you already pick it up, and see how you can improve the deck, because the deck is pretty strong. I think that's why it's one of the best decks in Modern right now. So I think the first thing to know about this deck here, the blue-red Murktide, is that it's more of a control deck, and I mean that control in quotes. And I wouldn't really describe it as an aggro deck, and not, maybe you can call it a tempo deck at times, but with the deck you really want to know what your role is in the matchup. So whether you're the one committing a threat and then essentially riding that threat, riding that tempo all the way to the finish where you win, or you sort of play it a control deck where with all your spells you're either getting rid of threats, countering important spells for them, and then you just, with that, you have an ability because you have a creature on board that lets you win. So the deck still needs to win with a creature, so ideally you have a creature on the board and then you interact with them. That's why it's a control deck. You're not flooding the board, or you're not holding, but you're not total control where you're waiting for opportunity to slam a big threat, because most of your threats are going to be relatively cheap. And to know this role, it's important to know what your matchup is, whether it's more important for you to slam a threat because they have a higher inevitability than you. Say, the best example may not be Tron, but Tron is one where they're going to eventually hit something big and you can't deal with it, so you eventually want to win. So you're kind of more the aggro role in that shell, versus like a Rhino deck where they're trying, or Indomitable creativity deck, or maybe even a Living End deck where they're just trying to slam their combo win as quick as possible. So in that case, rather than playing an extra threat to win, you want to be holding up mana. You want to be digging for answers and holding that up, versus slamming threats. And again, these are all in generic scenarios. If you only have threats in your hand, whatever it comes out to be, and you just need to slam and win next time, yeah, of course, make that play. But these are just in general threats, and your threats are very good. There's not many of them relative to other decks in Modern, and the reason that is because they all have really good abilities. So let's go into those cards. Okay, so specific cards. First card, of course, is the monkey Ragavan. What's it called? What was that one ape card? Man, that ape card's gone so far out of favor. It's the 1/2 ape that gets +1/+1 for forest. But anyways, this is the card that ape worries about. So yeah, 1 mana, win the game essentially. I mean, everyone's familiar with Ragavan. Again, this is a deck for more familiar players, so I won't go over it too much. But holding on to the treasure token is good if you want to hold up counter magic or a kind of a removal. Also, slamming bigger stuff, so getting a faster Murktide or faster Ledger Shredder is also good. That's why it's so good, because you have so versatile in it. You adjust that use of the treasure token to your role. And the second part is dash. That's why it's kind of not bad of a draw late into the game, because you get instant value out of it and you get to play something. So if you hit something big, right, sometimes you hit land, that's fine, but you hit something big, you get the treasure and you slam it, and that usually you can just take that to win the game. So also be aware of what you're slamming. Say if you're against a combo deck, usually like Rhinos, getting something off the top, I can't really even think of a permanent you would get off the top or want to cast right away, but getting the treasure token for your stuff is more important. Well, if you get something that like you hit like a Liliana right away, just slam it, just play that. So yeah, again, knowing your role is important. But ironically, even though I say it's the best card, it's the first card you want to sideboard out actually a lot of matchups, because you notice that Ragavan has one toughness, and especially you have to consider if you're going first or second. So if you're going second, you might want to cut the Ragavan if there's going to be X1 out there, because Ragavan is just going to slam in, trade, doesn't really serve a purpose. So very good card, but also first to sideboard out. DRC, great card. I think it's honestly, I think I say Ragavan's best card, but this card is what makes the deck. That first ability when you cast a non-creature spell, Surveyor 1 is just too good, and Beryllium. Delva, this is the thing Delva's jealous of. If the ape is jealous of Ragavan, Delva's jealous of DRC. It's just really good, and I think what DRC, most cases, again, most case scenarios, getting to Beryllium is the best. So even if there's a card you really want on top, I mean, of course, if you really want, and this is again very situational, you take it, but getting something that you might want might be better in the yard, so you get that Beryllium faster, and just filling up the graveyard is really good because of the next card, Murktide. Again, Murktide, your biggest threat. It comes in big. It can come in big. Come in as a 8/8. The only thing I'll mention is Murktide, you have to be aware of how big you want to make it, because sometimes it's important to leave Beryllium in the yard, because if you have your DRC that you need to count for damage or lethal, it's important for that, or I guess that's the most important thing. But again, you don't have to make an 8/8 each time if you need stuff in the yard, or you know the attacking certain cards in your yard. So say like, you know, your opponent's at 10, you might want to leave it just at 5, because you can get them too, because having at 6, 7, 8 in that scenario doesn't really matter, because you're gonna get lethal anyways, especially if other creatures. Important thing is just get it out of the bolt range, so don't cast it for 0. But I can't really ever see a situation where you have at least get one card out of it. And it's also a good card to sideboard out if you know your yard's going after, because all these other threats are really good. Like Ledger Shredder is a big addition. Sometimes the Ledger Shredder is gets bigger than Murktide. And again, if you have a DRC and Ledger Shred out, know how to stack your triggers. Most of the time you want to DRC first, that way you get a scry and then you draw it. Or there's some situations, again, this is being very general, some situation when you reverse it, most of the time you want to scry first and then connive. And making it big, at least getting it at 2/4 is important, because that gets set out bolt. And sometimes not casting it right away, waiting for that ability to get it to connive, to get it to 2/4 is important. Yeah, and then here's the flex spot. I have Brazen Barrier in this deck list. You can flex. I've seen Subtlety, I've seen other cards. In this case, Brazen Barrier is just another 3/4 attacker with flash, which is pretty important for the deck. And the Petty Theft is probably the most relevant thing on it. Just, again, knowing your role. If you just need to get something off the board real quick so you win next turn, this is your card. Consider it's pretty straightforward. Lightning Bolt, I mean, it's been here since the beginning. The only thing I'll mention about it is, I'll mention two things. One is that sometimes you want to save it for face. And in those scenarios, again, being very generic, if you have a board you're committing to and they have an inevitability end, if you have a board and they have an inevitability, sometimes it's better just to be like, save it for the face, save it for that last 3 points of damage, or how many points of damage. And it's instant, so you can always know. And that's the case for when you're beating them down, they're gonna win next turn. Might as well save the Lightning Bolt for the face if you need it, right? Before using it on a threat. You have to evaluate the threat, or the thing you're gonna bolt, is that gonna win them next game, or is that really not gonna do anything, and then I just save my bolt for the face. And the balance between this and Holy Heat. So if you know you're in a position or a match where bolts are going towards creatures, you have to know when to use Lightning Bolt and then Holy Heat. All things being equal, of course, because on Holy you do 6 damage, but that's based on Beryllium. Lightning Bolt will do 3. LPS has been a surprisingly good card than I thought. Again, because the deck is value, well, not value, but playing low cost effects that generate higher mana value. So Spell Pierce is one, and this is one where you have to kind of balance when you're going to leave something up for it versus when you're not. Like saving spell first turn 1 against a deck that does spell turn 1 might be very important rather than committing a creature. And you gotta know that it does fall off late game because they have the mana for it. And Holy Heat, I mean, this is just insane. It makes Fatal Push. I wouldn't say it makes Fatal Push irrelevant, but it's definitely if you fought Fatal. This is what Fatal Push is kind of getting jealous of. Because Beryllium, right? And it also overclaws the Planeswalker, 6 damage to any creature Planeswalker. I think that kills most of everything in Modern. Oro, rest in peace, hello Oko, if he was still alive. But I can't think of everything more than 6 loyalty or health that'd be fair for this 1 mana cost to trade favorably with. Counter spell, thanks Wizards. Expressive Iteration, this also makes the deck. This is very definitive of this deck. Probably I said this about all the other cards, a lot of cards, but this is the best card in there. It's better to hold off on it. I'd say slamming at turn 2, unless, again, being very generic and situational, unless you have nothing else to do, just saving it for kind of sculpting the rest of your hand when you're running down of cards in your hand is better, because you get 3 cards, and then combined with DRG or Ledger Shredder, you get 5 cards. I mean, 5 cards, 4 cards. I guess you could get 5 cards, but things to know about this. Oftentimes you want to get a land drop with it, or people get land drops I've seen with it, but sometimes don't get the land drop. Sometimes you again evaluate your board and see what you really need, and then remember what you put to the bottom, especially when you're running out of fetches. Remember what you put to the bottom, because when you search for that card later, you have to kind of do the probability, what's drawing this card I need if I know it's on the bottom. Bobble, pretty good card. The only thing I'll say here is that sometimes it's better just to save in your hand for the trigger instead of running out. And for triggers, I mean DRC and Ledger Shredder. So this turn 2 Ledger Shredder, and then this right away will automatically guarantee your Ledger Shredder to be a 2/4. The other trick is if you use this with fetch land, so sandbagging the fetch lands you have lets you do a free scry. So you can have the fetch scry, bobble, target yourself, see what's on top. If you don't like it, you fetch it away and you just draw whatever card's next. Okay, and then dress down's the flex spot. This deck list we cut to consider, but this dress down could be anything. If you're a meta where dress down pays off, put this in. I've seen again other stuff here. You can play something a little more spicy, a higher planeswalker, or just another spell pierce, whatever. Lands are pretty stock. Things to note here: we have 3 islands. I like to split between the snow and island for whatever reason. This is for when we add Blood Moon or playing against Blood Moon. This is a card that just you want to kind of draw late game, because again, same effect as the Brazambaria Temple, get something off the board for a turn, and then you kind of win next turn or the turn after. In terms of keeping hands with lands, there's a lot of things goes into keeping hands. I won't go into that because that's probably its own video, but things to note with this deck: 1 land is very feasible depending on, again, the rest of your hand. And there's a lot of digging potential in the deck when we have the Beryllium engines going on. So keeping lower land hands is technically better. Depending on what you have in your hand, a 3-hand land might be a mulligan, just because of the ability for you to operate on low lands and just get lands by the sheer amount of cards you'll go through. Alright, next is Sideboard. Again, Sideboard is very personal and very meta adaptive. So this part can be outdated really anytime soon, but good cards. EE, just great. Hits tokens, which going wide against this deck is very possible. Chalice is the biggest thing you have to worry about, so getting rid of Chalice is big. And just be aware of your own stuff. If you put on 1, of course, there's decks that go wide with 1 mana cost, and just be aware of how you sequence things. And I mean, you can't always perfect, because if you draw one thing to the other, it doesn't work. But yeah, Flusterstorm, I think it's a underrated card in this deck, because again, with threats, you're not looking for permanent answers with this. Sometimes it acts as like a gotcha spell pierce, which is decent, but you really want it against the combo decks that have answers for your counter spells, so that way they can't counter all the storm triggers. Essentially, that's why this is very important. And you're not just running spell pierce, the storm aspect is very important. Abrade, biggest thing is Chalice. Dress down, again, flex card here. Unlicensed Hearse, I played with it. I never really attacked with it. It does get rid of stuff in their graveyard, which is good, but I just find it slow. And again, I did mention sex control, but it's slow in the sense that I guess, and this is probably anecdotal, but it's just slow. There's some things where the situations where I want to get rid of the whole graveyard, and like a quick whole graveyard solution would have been better than this card, but I understand the tempo and it builds into this big monster, so not a threat, because it slots in up here while doing stuff down here, if that makes sense. Blood Moon, biggest thing to remember here is that it's just not an insta win, right? It's you have to put stuff behind it to make it good. So committing it right away, or spending all your resources, commit it right away is probably not the best play. Let's see, and then this one, again, there's some situations where it's really good, but I find it very niche where the other cards kind of do the same thing. It's nice, but it's been okay if I've seen it. I think Fury, I guess skipping next card, we'll get back to that. Fury does that job a little better. It is a 2-for-1 for yourself, but sometimes you get them for 4 cards, so it's really just a 2-for-4, which is great. This is really good against other blue decks, and again, late game is just a counter, but again, falls off in certain situations. Alright, so let's quickly go over the big decks and quick sideboard tips I noticed. 4-color midrange, I think you're pretty favored. They play expensive stuff, but they generate great value, if that makes sense. So it's just a value creature, like they have creation, random 6 and stuff. I think the point thing is to remember they have to tap out for big creatures, and their first couple of turns are slow because it's really just fetch, triumph, fetch, triumph. So the thing here is just really consider what you need to be countered, what needs to be dealt with, and what quite doesn't, because eventually they're gonna outvalue you. Thanks, Toyota. They're gonna outvalue you, so you want to really be, I guess, considerate or be very mindful of what cards you play and stuff, because again, it'll take long to go, but if they get going with the big cards, they'll do stuff, and they'll definitely be 2-for-1ing you a lot, so keep that in mind. Just because they land something big doesn't mean it's the end of the world. You can play around it. Your deck has inevitability. You just have to be more. The biggest thing to consider this one is card priority. Things to sideboard in and out. It's kind of hard. Because maybe a Braid if they bring in Chalice is a good one, and maybe a Nice and Hearse here from more threats. Blood Moon's a good one. Just beware that. The thing with Blood Moon you have to be aware of it is if you get them once, shame on them. I don't know how the saying goes, but you get them once, it's nice. Getting them the second time is a little harder, but it does slow down that game, so keep that in mind how you sideboard. So sideboarding here is more mind games. It's really the play that's more important, I think, here. The mirror. Again, know your role. Whoever plays first needs to play like they're playing first. Whoever plays second, and then this isn't really advice, needs to know how to play second. What I mean by that is, you're playing first, keep your tempo, know what to fight over. If you're playing second, know that if they have, I guess, a creature out, that's your priority. Then running your own creature out, you can't really do both at once. So yeah, mirror is fun. I like it. This is cute. Alright, hammer time. This is a situation where Fury can go 2-for-1. And the thing about your cards here is that, again, you have to know what they're going for. So be aware that equipment doesn't do anything unless it's attach anything. First off, Sigurd A's makes things hard, so this is worth spell piercing or fighting over. And then again, Giver Runes makes damage too, so we're trying to get, and an Esper Sentinel is also one. So these are the most problematic things in this deck. But maybe it's better just to get rid of the spell pierce, all counter magic, so counter spells come out obviously for sideboarding. So counter spell goes out. Maybe the spell pierce 2, ragavans come out because you just get blocked by whatever. And you put in your engineered explosives, your braid, the Brotherhood's End, your fury, and just again know what they have at instant speed because of Stoneforge Mystic and the Sigurda's Aid, but also know that they need a creature to win. Creativity, combo deck. Thoughtseize makes it hard, but again, this is the thing, you know, that has those come out. This is getting lots of value. So counter. Yeah, and then your counter spells, Flusterstorm. You could play, this is when you play in Licensed Hoods to get rid of the stuff in the graveyard. They have 2 ways to do it, so it's kind of a reanimate thing, so it's 2 angles of operation. Just be aware of that, and also be aware of when they don't have, they can't do both at once, right? Setting up a persist reanimate combo is much harder than a what's it called? What was I saying? No, just persist. No, yeah. Setting up persist and this using one tangent. Yep. Rakdos midrange, playing a lot against this. Again, you have blue, they have black. Be aware of the main board Blood Moons. Be aware of this. The biggest thing about this deck, and this Primus kind of along, is this. Going after this stuff when they use this, make sure you're not losing your removal spell to remove this. Make sure they tap down everything. Because getting to grief twice is grief. Combo deck, again, in this role, you're the control deck. You want to have a creature out, but if that's at the cost of you tapping out, don't do anything else, because again, most of this other stuff they can do doesn't really do much. You can deal with it, right? Like, and hold on, only hate that. So the way you lose is just tap out and they do this and this, and then they force, and then this is when the storm count is important. Burn deck, burn. It's again, the thing with burn is that you have to establish yourself. You can't just sit back and do nothing because they'll run you over. So usually you want to play a threat, protect it, and do it. And usually the way good burn players will play against you is build up card advantage. So they throw, like, it's going to turn 4, they throw 3 cards at you, you counter 1, and then they throw the next 4 cards at you. That's how a good burn player will play against you if you don't have a threat coming out. So with that, again, if they're doing that, you just dig deep and find out all your answers. And aggressive, mulligan aggressively. Yawgmoth, I will play this a lot. Oh man, what are these ads? Okay. Again, sort of like Hammer Time. It's all creature based. Just be aware of playing Gris is the thing. Eldritch Evolution countering that. They just 2-for-1 themselves, or they just 0-for-1 themselves. Something. You get value out of it essentially. Be aware of the interaction. There's a lot of interactions to learn. There's ways to win. Just know which things win, which ones don't. Going after the mana, just have to be aware of what's in your hand. So if they're on the play, if you're on the play, you kill the bird. If you're not on the, if you're on the draw, you have to really consider it and what the rest of your hand looks like. Will I counter the thing that comes out, or do I just need to kill the bird first and deal with the 2-drop? That's sort of the big question. That's sort of the primer for the deck. It's pretty fun. I like it, and yeah, thanks for listening.